Hey everybody, I've been working once again almost exclusively on the base vehicle since the last update. Along with making the camera system more dynamic, adding some new ways to grind, and improving the tracking of air movement, I've added a character to the vehicle with its own set of brand new tricks. In this devlog, I'll go deeper into some of the implementation details and design decisions behind the changes, plus talk about what's next on the development roadmap. This is Untitled Driving Game Devlog number 6. One of my early discoveries on the project was that a good camera system was going to be crucial to making the game feel right. Making a fluid camera system for most games is hard enough, but then there's the added complexity from a fast-paced third-person game where the player's position and view target is rapidly changing. I've never worked on tuning a camera system this deeply before, besides tweaking a few lag values here and there. Despite playing games and watching videos on the subject, I haven't been able to fully articulate what I wanted out of the game's camera, so I've just been experimenting a lot with different settings to see what feels best. Before this set of tweaks, the camera system was just a basic spring arm with some lag added. Previously, to do any kind of air movement, you had to hold down the air flip button to enable it. This allowed me to turn down the spring arm rotational lag to an extremely low value when the button was held down, which essentially froze the camera when in the air and flipping around. Fortunately, this worked out well, during my playtesting at least, but I knew it wasn't sustainable long term. The current camera behavior is that the directional lag will slowly increase with speed and rotational lag decreases to a much lower number when the vehicle isn't grounded. When the rotational lag changes, it gets set via a variable that smoothly interpolates it to the correct value instead of giving a quick jarring switch back to the default position. While the rotational lag is using the default checkbox on the UE4 spring arm, I encountered some weird jittering issues with the default directional camera lag, so I ended up turning that off and finding / writing my own function to handle that beside the function that interprets the rotational speed changes. The last small change is that the camera now flips around when reversing. As a result of these changes, the camera system does feel a lot smoother, but there are still some little issues to work out. For example, with the addition of character tricks, it's hard to keep a good steady view of the current trick being performed while the vehicle is moving about in air. I've thought about ways to remedy this, such as a character-specific camera, switching to different cameras during tricks, or even adding some kind of additional viewing system like a picture-in-picture mode, but I haven't made any decisions. The addition of spinning, I'll touch a little bit more on that later, allows the player to see tricks more clearly, which will work for the time being. Still, the camera system will eventually need another final workover and final polishing needed to truly feel right. Character tricks were inevitable in Untitled Driving Game. There's only so many tricks you can do with just a vehicle by itself. I flirted with the idea back in devlog number 3, but with smaller vehicles and a more comedic style. While I did like the idea, the style just didn't feel right, so I pocketed the concept until now. Meet the first character, Stigxamo, the Mixamo racer that looks like the Stig according to Woodlea Games on Twitter. I don't have much experience when it comes to UE4 skeletal meshes or animation in general, which is why I knew that adding characters was going to be a tall task for me. The vehicle itself is currently set up using all static meshes. The wheels and body parts, the door, trunk, hood, and the body roll, lean, and all that, are all separate animated with interp functions in the vehicle blueprint. This wasn't done for any particular reason other than it's how I started, and I didn't want to learn proper vehicle rigging when I started animating the part movement. It works right now, but this might change in the future. If nothing else, I'd assume it's better to have a single skeleton mesh with the animations rather than the static with many for optimization purposes. The character right now is a skeletal mesh of the child vehicle. I assume the proper way, if I was working directly with a single artist or knew what I was doing, would be to have every single vehicle as a skeleton mesh and the character skeleton directly animated with the vehicle. Maybe this just cements how little I know about traditional animation workflows. My first run workflow consisted of importing the base vehicle, I'm only modeling the sedan currently, into a fresh Blender file, and then importing the Mixamo skeleton and mesh on top of that. From there, I made a base driving animation, which is just a looping pose, to build off of, and then I started making separate animations for each of the tricks. I then export only the Mixamo character from Blender and import that FBX into UE4, add the VARs and code into the vehicle blueprints to trigger the trick, and then plug the animations into the animation blueprint. I'm awful at Blender, so the animations are currently terrible, but they'll work until I can get some original characters and or hire an animator. Use your imagination and envision the characters moving around or yelling things during the various tricks until then. My goal is to have a set of vehicles and characters, the same basic tricks, but different special or vehicle specific tricks where available. I want any characters to be able to be paired with any vehicle, but allow slightly different experiences and visuals with each, so there's a reason to explore them all beyond any stat differences. Characters should share the same skeleton, but may have different special moves or emotes. The vehicle will have the same basic set of parts, wheels, left and right doors, hood, trunk, tailgate, back doors, whatever, but will have tweaked animations where necessary. A truck will open the tailgate instead of the trunk, and eventually there could even be vehicles with like suicide or scissor door variations, for example. From the start of Untitled Driving Game, I've had a basic set of tricks, but never written down a full comprehensive list. I started a document that includes a full set of initial tricks I plan on implementing, and I've been working down that list. This has also allowed me to try and figure out the best default control schemes for both the controller and the keyboard. There's a lot of different buttons in use currently, and I'm not even sure if the game's fully playable on the keyboard with all the new tricks right now. I've separated the list into character and vehicle specific tricks with sections for ground, air, and special/variation tricks. One of the things I'm considering when working on tricks is the ability to have the same/nearly identical list between vehicles regardless of the type. It would have been easiest to make all the cars convertibles or ensure they all had at least sunroofs or T-tops, but that's not really my vision for the game. Trucks, cars, vans, sedans, coupes, convertibles, and anything else should have the same base functionality even though they may act or look different. This means generally ignoring things like the back seat or even sometimes standing on the roof, and instead focusing on tricks that revolve around the driver being in and around the front doors and hood area for the most part. All the vehicles should have some sort of body parts to open on the sides and front/rear of the vehicle. Special tricks per vehicle could utilize these specific styles. For the truck, you could jump into the bed, for instance. On top of the current vehicle, ground, and air tricks, there are now 8 character tricks and 8 vehicle body part tricks to pull off. There are also a few new ways to grind, including sideways and backwards. The character tricks include less outrageous tricks like the passenger, a trick where your driver moves to the passenger seat and starts hanging out the window screaming, to more outrageous tricks like hanging on, a Superman trick where you're hanging out the passenger's door, and Yeehaw, my favorite trick so far, where the driver sits on its roof/windshield and rides the vehicle like a bull. I really like the character tricks and I'll keep them in, but some of them have created a really pushing the envelope on what feels realistic even for this crazy game. Hang glider and hood ornament are really fun tricks, but they look absolutely ridiculous. I haven't decided yet if that's a good or a bad thing. If you imagine the character tricks are akin to the grab tricks in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, then I imagine the body parts are more to be like flip tricks. They're less impressive, but a solid foundation for combos and useful in tighter situations. There's 8 body part tricks, 4 diagonal triggers being various variations of the normal trunk, doors, and hood opening. Currently both body part and character tricks buttons are held, but that might change in the future. I've also been considering what other tricks I could realistically add in. The vehicle has a horn that can trigger a trick, but other than that I haven't implemented any vehicle specific tricks. I think flicking on and off the lights could be a possibility, but there's currently too many buttons as it is. Right now I think there's a big enough trick list to keep things interesting, but of course I'll be building upon that down the road. But let's take a look at and update the development roadmap for Untitled Driving Game that I introduced in the last devlog. We've been focusing on the vehicle section, so I'm only going to mark parts off from there right now. I've added the characters of the vehicles, so we can cross that off. I've added more tricks and trick modifiers, so we can go ahead and cross that off. I've reworked physics controls to be tighter and more accurate, we'll cross that off. Better models and animations, for me that was getting the sedan and the open body parts and stuff like that, so we can go ahead and cross that off. I've worked a little bit on the vehicle audio, but not enough, so we're going to leave that undone for now. And then I've developed an updated camera system with better dynamic movement for tricks. We'll go ahead and cross that off. It's rough around the edges and needs more fine tuning, but the base vehicle, sans multiplayer and better audio, is nearly complete. I've worked a little bit on updating the audio, but I'm going to postpone that until I start taking on the overall sound design for the project. I still have not started to test multiplayer, but I'm planning on starting that implementation very soon. The base vehicle has better animations, and I have a model with doors and a character, but I'll eventually need to commission 2 original vehicle models and at least 1 more original character. I prefer to not use mix-em-up characters exclusively, before I can say that the initial vehicle work is actually done. I've started implementing some basic hittables and testing destructibles in the environment. The problem I'm running into is that the vehicle just runs right over any smaller physics objects, including destruction debris, so it just throws off the driving flow. I tried adding some fake bumpers and creating blueprint actors that give custom impulses up and out to the objects when overlapped and prevent anything going under the vehicle, but so far nothing's really worked. I'll continue to try and figure out the best way to implement those once I'm starting to focus a little bit more on the level design. Level design is going to be another crucial element to making the game work, and I'm going to start focusing on filling all the level blocks for LATC. I really want to build a strong network alliance that allows the player to follow and ensure they're constantly kept moving and in a flow state. By the time the next devlog rolls around, I plan to have tested basic multiplayer functionality and have a much more comprehensive block out for LATC. Thanks for watching and following along with the development of Untitled Driving Game. Since you've made it this far, here's an insider tip. I finally decided on a name for the game. Drumroll please. Tristan Cole's Pro Driver. I think it's pretty obvious where the name draws inspiration from. I agonized over the game's name for a long time, and I have a few documents and scratch pads with various candidates, but nothing ever stuck. If it tells you anything, the couple I liked were Tricky Tires / Sticky Tires and Drive 720 or 720 PSI, which is a reference to 720, the first skateboarding video game, neither of which combinations were very good. The TCPD name also follows the Put Your Name on Your Game mantra by Bennett Foddy and Zach Gage, as well as pretty clearly gives an idea of what the game is about in my opinion. So what do you think about the name? Are the character tricks too crazy or not crazy enough? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter for the latest news on the not so untitled driving game, Tristan Cole's Pro Driver. Later.